Hi guys, and welcome back. This is another one of my videos from past projects that I've done, and these were before or during COVID, and I wasn't doing video recording. So these videos, or this video I should say, that I'm doing was from a pair of PCs that I picked up from an elderly chap who was closing down a warehouse he had. And this was just some of the gear that was in amongst it that I picked up and done. These two machines are Bondwell. To be specific, a Bondwell 12 and a Bondwell 14. Now you may remember the name because in my history to Spectra Video, they were the company that bought shares in Spectra Video and in the end outright owned Spectra Video before shutting it down. So these are a couple of the machines that they had and they were introducing to the market at that time. But this is pre-DOS, or just on the edge of DOS, and these machines were running CP/M, which was the main business style software of the day. So grab yourself a drink and something to eat if you like, sit back and I will take you on this journey of repairing and getting these Bondwells running. In a shed a long time ago, there was, I'm just joking guys, a long time ago I picked up a couple of machines from a chappie who was closing down his collection of gear, and this stuff had been sitting on the bottom shelves or on the floor, and is a little bit worse for wear. So anyway, this is the journey of two Bondwell luggable computers. Now the luggable, if you didn't know, was the precursor to the laptop, and these were quite a large box that you sort of picked up and dragged around, and then you put them down, plugged them into the mains. The keyboard would drop down off the front of them, and you'd have a little wee 4-inch amber or green screen in them, and one floppy disk or two, and the later ones like the 14 and later had a hard drive in them, all of about 10 megabytes. I mean, hey, who could want more? What would you fill it up with? We are talking back in the 80s. So anyway, this is where I kick in.
Stand by for action.
So I got both these machines, so I decided to start on the older one, the Bondwell 12. Got it and plugged it in, and this was the days before I had tools to plug things in to make sure things didn't go bang before I turned them on. So anyway, I plugged this in, turned it on, the machine started up, but the problem I had is the little amber screen on it was just scrolling over and over and over, and I couldn't make head nor tails what was going on with it. So I decided I can't really see anything on the outside, because sometimes they would have a little knob for adjusting the scroll on them, but this I couldn't see anything. So I was thinking, oh well, this is one I'm going to have to open up. So then I went along and I put that aside and unplugged it, and I plugged in the Bondwell 14. Now I switched this one on and it powered up and it came up to the screen and it had a hard drive in it. So it went to boot the hard drive, and there it just sat. There was nothing other than that. The hard drive didn't even try to head seek. Now these old drives, if you've ever heard them, the noise they make when they move their heads backwards and forwards is awesome. You really need to hear them. I think you can get a MP3 or WAV file of it on the net, but it's a really awesome sound. Anyway, I decided that, nah, that one's going to have to come apart and be looked at too. I decided, well, I'm using this one at the moment, I might as well start here. So I opened it up, and upon opening it up, I checked all the cables and made sure the boards weren't shorting or touching, or that cables haven't unplugged out of boards from movement, because a lot of these machines over time with movement that the cables and the plugs they were in weren't that great and they would come loose. So I didn't see anything there, so I thought, well, I'll check the board over to make sure there's no bulging capacitors or leaking capacitors or any of those other issues. So I went through that and checked, and I couldn't see anything on the main board or the board that was on top of the drives. So I thought, okay, I will shut it down. I shut it down and then turned it back on. And then it was booting up, and then it came up to a login screen. And on this time it said to me, do you want to boot from floppy or hard drive? And I thought, oh, okay. But I don't have any floppy disks for this, because I didn't get any with it. They were just the machines by themselves. I mean, they didn't even come with the power cable. Lucky I have those. So anyway, I decided, well, I don't have any disks. So the other option was to press to start the hard drive. So I pressed the key, and it posted an error. Error reading file of hard drive. Bugger. And me with no disks, or even able to get an image of a hard drive to try and repair it. Oh dear. So this is the picture of the error that I got when it came up. So anyway, I decided, well, maybe these are old, so it could be a sticking problem or that. I left the machine turned on for about 30 minutes and shut it down, retried it a few times, but it just came up with the same error over and over again. So I was thinking to myself, well, maybe there is an issue with the hard drive. And some of these old drives, they are MFM or RLL drives. They do go and lose the partitions on them. So I may have to reformat and reinstall the software. But I don't have the discs. I went on the net and did a search, and on eBay, oh yes, here are some discs for the Bondwell 12 and 14 for reinstallation of the hard drive and boot up disc. Oh, cool, I thought. And then I had a look at it. At $100 New Zealand for a pair of discs plus shipping to have them landed here? No. So that was the end to that idea. So now I have a few pictures of the inside of the Bondwell 14 for you. See how they had soldered the hard drive adapter. Now this was not a separate card, they'd made it part of the drive, and the main board. When I opened the Bondwell 12, it had a header pin inside it, and it had one for the floppy cable. But for some reason, in their infinite wisdom, they'd taken it off and wired a ribbon cable directly from one board to the other. The ribbon cable going to the daughter board, it would then disappear underneath that and would go God knows where, I suspect, to the hard drive. So the cable went from the floppy controller via a ribbon into the daughter board, and then it went under the hard drive to where the Western Digital MFM hard drive board is mounted. And this was actually mounted onto the hard drive. This, in my thinking, was probably the same way or a similar way that they did the early K-Pro and other Z80 machines back in the day, as a lot of them used a form of floppy drive communication to go to the hard drive, and that's why they were never very fast at loading off the hard drives in today's standards. But they were certainly a lot faster and a lot more capacity than a floppy drive back then. The next thing I decided is that I need to do something about this cable. I wasn't happy that it was soldered onto the board, because that can just cause issues down the track. So I thought that is one thing I have to do and have to check out. So anyway, the cable on the back of the board at the top is the floppy drive cable, which is the 34-pin one. The one on the side of that board is for the hard drive. And you can see what I mean, that they both are coming off that same controller. There is a picture of the side, and you can see the hard drive and the Western Digital MFM card together. I checked the floppy drive, and as with most of these, it was a 360K floppy drive, which is fine. But when I did a thorough look at them, there was an issue with these drives, or there has been an issue with these drives over time, and they get what's called capacitor rot. And this is where the capacitors leak and start eating into the board. Now this is not an acid as a lot of people think it is. It's actually an alkaline that does this, but it works like an acid when it's eating it. So alkalines can burn just as bad as acidics can burn. So anyway, this is what happens, and they leak out of the bottom and then they eat the copper tracks away. I looked on this drive and oh no, there definitely was capacitor rot starting in on this. So I decided, okay, I have to remove the caps and I'll have to wait to get in some replacement, as I did not have the values that they needed. And these needed some funny values of capacitors I never carried, bipolars and things like that in the electrolytic line. So off I went and ordered about 100 of each, and from China. And remember, this is around the time of COVID, so instead of the 3 weeks it would take, it was something like 7 to 8 weeks to get here, because I am in New Zealand, which is quite a way away. I also ordered that amount of each capacitor because I've got about 7 of these drives, and as I was saying, 360k floppy drives were very common back then, and a lot of the vintage gear I have is running the similar brands of drives, which were TX, and they were generally the TX 501 and 503. They were the main culprits, but there were Panasonics and that as well. I do have information, and that will be another video coming up at a later date. I do have information on repairing these types of drives. I decided next, I opened up the keyboard off the front of the case to check to see how bad it was inside, because some of these, the cables, they deteriorate and fall apart and the plastic disintegrates on them and that. But I was looking at that and it wasn't too bad. The keys all look okay, but I noticed they had a bit of yellowing onto them. I didn't know much about retro brighting back then, so I did know about putting them through the dishwasher on a low cycle with just a little bit of washing detergent in there. Don't use dishwashing liquid or tablets or that, it is too corrosive. I put the outer case, the front of the case and the keys in there and put it on to a light clean. I did take the labels off the case so they wouldn't get ruined. One thing to watch out for is there are 3 rubber washers for the 3 oversized keys on the keyboard. Be careful of this, because as they will fall off when it is tipped upside down, and you don't want to lose them, because good luck in trying to find some more. As I had hoped, just a little dust was under the keys, so all was well. This is the dreaded floppy drive capacitor rot I was telling you about. As you can see by the dark areas, this is where they have leaked. I have cleaned off the solder mask and it's not too bad, and the track seems to be intact. Now, to clean off the solder mask, you can use what is called a fiberglass pen. And you can buy these on Trade Me and Wish and Temu or even eBay. The fiberglass wears away and you can buy replacement styluses that go in. And they're non-abrasive on the copper. They just take the lacquer off the track so you can repair them. What I do is then, once I've repaired them and I put the new capacitors on, I reseal it. But what I generally do is I go to the $2 shop and get some nail polish, and I get a clear that has a green through it or a clear that has a red through it, just so it's it tries to blend in with the board. So anyway, now I have to wait for these parts to do these disk drives. So I decided I'll go and open up the Bondwell 12 to see why this screen is rolling and where to adjust it. But this one, though it is working, it has also been sitting in water for some time by the looks of it. And in taking it apart, I also had to drill out 4 to 5 of the screws that held it together. Oh dear, more repairs. This case seemed a bit more brittle than the Bondwell 14 was. so I needed to be a little bit more gentle with it. The inside looked better than I thought it was going to. It was rather clean, and apart for some rust dust in the bottom and a few screws that had started to rust, which I will replace anyway, the floppy drive was a real pain to remove. Not like the Bondwell 14. It was remove 5 screws, unclip and slide out the drive. Done. Oh no, not the Bondwell 12. You have to take the whole thing apart, disassemble it, even down to removing the CRT tube out the front to get to the screws that hold down one side of the floppy cage. This goes to mounts in the plastic case. They won't be going back, and I'll adapt a clip and make a system for it like the Bondwell 14 has. The B drive in this unit was like new and had no capacitor rot on it, but I removed the caps and I thought I might as well redo all of these drives anyway. At least that way I know they've all been done and they're all in good nick in the future. The A drive was in better condition than the Bondwell 14 drive, but that's getting done as well. So now to check on the keyboard of the Bondwell 12. While I have it in its case in the dishwasher, again removing the labels, when opening the keyboard, well, what a surprise. I know where all the water was sitting now. I don't know if you know of the drink Fanta, the orangey coloured drink made by Coca-Cola. Well, sitting in the bottom of the case, it looked like powdered Fanta. There was a bit. So when the cases are done, I think the keys, the keyboard board, and the keyboard case are all going in for a wash. The funny thing is that the keys are like new on the outside, but anyway, we will clean them. Looking at the board a little closer on the Bondwell 12, I noticed that some of the keyboard tracks may have an issue and may need repair, or that because it had been sitting in the water so long, the electronics or the ICs on the board may be dead. But we will see. The oily spots you can see is from CRC that I used to help get the screws out, which I did manage to do. They have all been cleaned from the dishwasher. So I'm letting it dry and we'll look at the key track in a few days. There was a small update. I managed to get a copy of the Bondwell 14 install discs from the USA and it was only $29 New Zealand. But eBay decided we want to charge you $80 postage to get them to you. But I decided no. And I used a postal company, New Zealand Post, which was a forwarding system in the States called U-Shop. And so I used them to send it back to me. And it worked out a lot cheaper. Looking at the Bondwell 12 case after cleaning, it is not in very good condition wise. There is a lot of, it's been sitting next to something and there's shadowing over the case where the sunlight's been on it. And I'd been thinking, maybe painting it, and I can go to the local paint shop and get something as close to the original colour as I could and paint the case. Mind you, the Bondwell 14 case was also very yellow, so I'm still wondering, maybe not. I could match the paint for it as well. With that, pondering that question, I now needed to get or to find some replacement screws, etc., to replace all the rusted ones in the Bondwell 14 case. These are pictures of the sides, the top of the Bondwell 12, and the yellowing Bondwell 14 case, as you can see. Some good news on the Bondwell 12 keyboard was that the tracks looked okay after further inspection and after cleaning. After a really good clean down and a wipe down with IPA, there seems to be no broken traces, so we're not looking for a new keyboard, thank goodness. These are some pictures of close-ups of the keyboard, and this is looking at it from the top, and it all looks okay for now. Now I've got to find me some more screws and bolts, as most of the Bondwell 12 ones are rusted up as well. Who knew sitting in water would do this? Well, yay! The 2 Bondwell 14 floppies arrived today, and I put the first one into the Bondwell 14, and it booted it into the floppy system with the message, press F key for floppy, and as requested on the screen, and it booted into CPM 3.02. Awesome, I thought. So then I decided to look around on the disk and did a list of the files on the disk, and it listed the disk contents fine. But I have no information on resetting the hard drive, as I have no information on it or on what software to use to do it, or what on the disk to use to redo it, as I did not get any manuals with the Bondwells. Also, I have to reopen the Bondwell 14 and check the power supply unit, as when I was playing around with the disk software, the hard drive started to spin down and then come back up again, and then after a while the system froze. So I restarted the unit, and now the hard drive takes a while to spin up, and the floppy drive reads, then comes up with an error. So I think the power supply unit has an issue. Also noticing the display did not come up until I did a reset as well. But I'm just waiting for some bipolar caps to come in for the other floppy drives to finish them all off, and then I will try the Bondwell 12 out with a floppy drive. So I had some time to check the PSU, or the power supply, out, and really, who designed and made these cases for the power supply units? I had to cut spot weld to get it open. What a pain in the you can imagine. And well, after all that and checking it all out, it was okay. But it paid to check it out and make sure it was okay. So it was worthwhile doing. The next thing, I went and looked at the main board and the cable. I could not see anything that stood out, so I unplugged the hard drive to see if it was to do with a power supply loading thing from the hard drive, making it drop the voltage. No, it's not, and it's still not spinning up. It's still not booting off the hard drive. So now to remove the motherboard with the floppy drive and hard drive boards, and what a mess. All under the boards, the soldering was not good. Whoever did this really should have gotten someone who knows what they are doing to do it. Solder blobs everywhere. They had attached the ribbon cable, and there were wires all over the place, with small wires in the through holes, and then they soldered the ribbon cable on top to the PCB on both sides. Well, after a few hours of swearing and desoldering and cleaning and using a desoldering pump to pull the solder out of it, and cleaning out the desoldering pump multiple times, and then the board, I only had one trace I had to repair. Thank goodness. So now I have ordered some single row locking plugs and headers to make it so you can plug in the cable and unplug it if you need to, so it is not completely soldered all the time. I'm waiting on those to come in as well, along with the caps still. One thing I did find was a broken wire on the ribbon cable before I desoldered it off the boards, and this is why I removed the ribbon cable from being soldered and put it back to a header and pin arrangement. It's just easier, and you don't get these issues. Sorry for these few pics, guys. They are a little bit out of focus, and I needed to get myself a better phone and a better camera. The red is the lost track, and the blue non-connection pin. I have a new phone now, so I will see how the pics go for now. Well, I looked at the Bondwell 14 keyboard and wondered how easy it would be to open it to check the keys and the key switches, as it had a lot of rust on the metal frame for the key switches to sit in. So I decided I have nothing better to do while I am waiting. I decided to desolder them all and see. Well, opening it up, I found a mess in there, and I had to set to cleaning it up and removing the rust and then treating it with a chemical at the time. And this is a non-abrasive chemical that I got from a car parts place called Repco. The keyboard unit was easy to take apart after desoldering the switches from the main board. I cleaned up the metal with the rust converter. Next was to paint it black again, as it used to be back then. Now it's time to check each switch to see if any of them are faulty and how many. Well, as you can see, things are moving along well. I have cleaned up the keyboard and the metal frame, but in the testing journey I have found some keys are not making contact internally. So here are some updates, pictures of the keyboard, top of the keyboard and the frame. As you can see in the pictures, the top right switch is one that's not working, and also the caps lock key is not working. I still need to check the rest of these to make sure there are no more. Well, after this mad time with COVID, the parts have finally arrived today from China, and so with them here I did some more repair work on the Bondwell 14, and now this is better than what it was before. The ugly soldered on ribbon cables that were there on the Bondwell 14 are now gone. I just need to make a few leads to put them back on again now. This is a lot better idea, I think, as now I can unplug the drives without taking the controller board off as well. With that all done, I have to check all the non-working keys on the Bondwell 12. This was to see what I can do to salvage them, if I can. Fingers are crossed. And also to make the new floppy drive, hard drive cables at some stage. Well, it was a wet day today, and I have things to fix. So I got to it and made the cables for the Bondwell 14 floppy drive and hard drive. It does look a lot better with the repairs. Well, I think so anyway. Now, after making the cables, I decided to do a tear down and test and fix and reassemble of the whole unit. I just want to be sure. This is a picture of the two keys that were faulty, so as you can see how they look. I was lucky that the keys are not moulded shut, so to open the keys up I used a small jeweler's screwdriver. This was to pry out the clips on one side of the switch at a time. With a thumbnail holding the switch partly open on one side, I then did the clips on the other side. You need to take your time so you do not break the clips. These are very tiny tabs, so as they hold the whole thing together and keep it closed. Both sides of the switch are now open, so slowly wiggle the top off. Be very careful, as there is a spring inside, and you don't want to lose that, I can tell you. So now gently pull it apart, and remembering not to let the spring fly out and go where you can't find it. Remove the switch bottom and the spring, and then put them where you won't lose them, in a container or a jar. Next, remove the white plastic plunger and clean it, and then clean the top of the switch it was in. This is just to get all the gunk out of it. Okay, so now onto the bottom part where the pins stick out. You will notice that there is like a red wax or glue. You need to take it out or off. This is so you can release the pins sticking out the bottom. Just take your time. It does come off quite easy. Sorry for the last pick. It's not too good, but you get the idea. This is how it should look after you've cleaned it off. You can see all the wax is sitting on the table from when I removed it. Now you need to gently wiggle the pins side to side, gently pushing down on them, and they will slowly move inside the switch base. The switch should look like this picture below. Next, gently pull the inner switch part from the other side, and the whole thing should come out. Using a small pair of pliers will help. Now gently take the metal switch clip off. Don't worry if you have to bend it a little to get it to come out. Just don't be too rough. We will need to have to rebend this part when we put it back in, as that is part of the problem with the contacts not making connection properly, and we bend it to make it tighter so that it works properly. So now testing the switch gives me an open switch, and pressing the center button did nothing. So I used some contact cleaner to clean any oxidization inside of the two metal plates. Now finally, after cleaning and tweaking the switch, it seems to be working fine. Yes. So now to reassemble the switch. This is not hard, but it can be a little bit tricky to do. First you put the white plastic plunger into the top of the switch. It will only go in one way. Next you slide in the right side of the guides and slide them right the way down. Put the plunger all the way down. Now look close and you will see the second set of slots for the switch. Put this part of the switch the right way round. If you look at it, you will see how it is to go in. The metal part that pushes the switch closed should be against the white plunger. Push the switch down and make sure it's right down inside the base. Don't be too rough with it though. Now with the switch in place, use your jeweler's screwdriver to bend the metal push leg for the switch out a little. This makes the plunger press harder on the other switch contact. Next, place the spring on the little metal tit inside the plunger while holding it all upright. I did say it's a little tricky. Now gently position the base in the switch and make sure to have the switch legs and spring in their right places. Now gently press the two parts together. If you have done it right, it will click as it closes. Now with that finally together, we need to test the switch and see if it works as good as new. I did test the switches after reassembling, but really you only need to check them before you put the spring in and the bottom clips on. It was a double test to make sure it was working before it went back together and after it went back together. So I decided I put the Bondwell 14 back together and it booted up. I tested the hard drive boot, but it still says it has a missing file. CPM 3.sys is missing. So I tried booting off disk 1 of CPM 3.02 I got, and it booted off the disk. Sorry for the picture, my hand moved. One thing I noticed was the hard drive version was for 1982, but the floppy drive version was 1984 and was CPM 3.0, and the original CPM was 3.02. This was the one I got from the US. Now I need to know how to re-system the hard drive or to check what's on it. Any ideas? I have no information on this thing. If you know anything or you can help, please let me know in the comments below, as I'm still working on these machines today. So now, as for the Bondwell 12, I managed to fix the scrolling screen and put the floppy drives back in. I booted the A floppy drive, but found it was not working. And on inspection, I found that the stepper belt, which is stainless steel that moves the heads in and out, was broken. The floppy drive B also has an issue with the bearing on the shaft that the motor drives that turns the disc, and it binds all the time. I get it spinning free and re-put it all back together, and it's still spinning free when I have it completed. But then when I fire it up and try to read off the disc, the drive just locks, and if I try to turn it by hand after turning the power off, it's like it is frozen solid. Takes a bit to free it up, I can tell you, and to get it to spin freely again. Thinking about it, I might try to make one out of these two drives, as they are the same make and brand. I decide to do this not knowing how well this may go, but hey, it can't get any worse. I will check what I have in my parts and see if I have enough from others to do the job. I think I do. Oh, and the floppy drive repair for the Bondwell 14, it's working fine. So next I went and stripped the stepper strap off the 360k drive that the motor was binding on, and I put it on the other drive that had the broken strap. What a pain in the A that was. Well, good news is that the drive starts and moves the head to the outside of the disc, but that's it. And then it comes up with a drive error. At least it's a bit of progress. I may need the stepper motor adjusting, as there are two screws that hold it down, the strap that is, that are slotted. So for now I have shelved the drive for later. Next I picked up a spare 360k drive I had on the shelf for emergencies and plugged it in. It spins up and tries to read the disc but has a drive error. I need to find the jumper settings for it, or have a play. This I did having a play with the jumpers, but I did take a note of where the original settings were on it to start with. Well, after having a break and then coming back to play with the drives, I got the drive, which was an Epson 521i, to boot the CPM as drive A, and that was with no other drive connected. Well, I thought to myself, that was a win. One thing was, it did complain that drive B has a fault, but don't worry, as that's because I didn't have one connected up. Thinking about it, I decided to set the Epson to drive B and put the original, or one of the original, TX back in and try again. And the same problem. It would just make a grinding noise and error out. It should at least try to move the heads. So in disgust, I decided I've had enough and turned it all off. After having a break away from it for a while, for a day or so, and scratching my head a little bit, I decided that if the motor was spinning, but the heads are not seeking, it must be on the top control board. So I took off the one from the donor drive that had the jammed spinning motor for the floppy, and put it on the one that I was testing, that I replaced the stepper on. I then powered it on and it spun up. Cool! It's working so far. Next I tried to read the disc, but my luck was not in, and I got an error with disc error. Well, at least that's better than before. At least now it's trying to read a disc. I know the disc is fine, as the Epson reads it. So I decided, let's try adjusting this stepper strap. It is probably not reading the right area on the disc. So out with a screwdriver and undo the two screws, and I moved them 1mm and then retightened. I then pressed the restart button and nope, still comes up with a read error. I then moved them another 1mm and retested, and I ended up doing this another 6 to 7 times, and all of a sudden, whammo, chunk, 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 it booted up. Cool! I'm stoked. Next, I tried a DIR on the disc, and it listed the drives the files, and cool. Let's see what I can do. So I loaded up a speech program that all the Bondwells come with. So I loaded the software and had a play with it. It's quite cool, really. And it works. Now, I thought, let's check the keyboard keys out. So after I tested all of them were okay, the only issue I had was the M and the F4 were intermittent. They were not working all the time. So I popped off their keycaps to check and retested them. No, they're not right. What I decided to do, I thought, well, I'll fire down a little bit of contact cleaner, which I did. And I shot down some Inox contact cleaner. Squirted a little bit down each key, and then I pressed them a lot. Up and down quite a bit. Then after some time, the M and the F4, which is actually the rename programmed key, came up and worked. I left it for a bit to let the contact cleaner dry out and then retested them. Awesome. They worked first time every time now. So I am happy. And I put the keycaps back on the keyboard. Cool, the keyboard is working fine. And all the keys as well. So now I decided it's time to test the system for real. I decided to try and make a copy of the original floppy disks that I'd bought. I didn't want to lose them from getting damaged. I put a disk in drive B, which was a new 2-density disk that I had, and went to format. But up come pile of E's on the format program. I need to look at the heads, as it reads the disks fine, but when it writes, it says there are errors. Even if I try a disk backup, it reads the A drive okay, but the copy to the B drive gets errors, and they all come up as E's. And a directory listing gets a CPM error, BDOS on B. Well, you can't win them all, not in one day anyway. Well, things just keep getting better and better. I logged into my account and found I had a private message from someone I didn't know. And guess what? They have made an image of a Bondwell 14 hard disk drive, Disk Tools disk. So I'm feeling really good. And I'm just waiting for them now. Okay, I've got the disk images. And now to make the real disk. Wish me luck. I had more of a play today, and I recapped 5 more floppy drives of the 501 and the 503s. I did have an issue with the Bondwell 12, in that when I turned it on, there was no sound. No beep or tweet. But after about 5 minutes of being on, it comes up. I have found where the speaker volume is on the PCB and turned it down, as it was a little loud. Anyway, at the same time, it would start to have problems with the floppy drives. So I'm going to recap the power supply on this one, the motherboard, and the CRT boards to be sure. I'm just waiting for a pile of capacitors to arrive to do this. What I will do is I will look at the Bondwell 14 while I wait for them to come in. Oh, one thing I did notice with the TAC is that the 501 and the 503 are the same physical drives. It's just that the 503 has 2 heads, so it is double-sided and has the extra components on the top board that the 501 doesn't. The motor driver board and the motors are all the same. So there is a plus. I decided to remove all the electro caps out of the motherboard after taking note of what they were. Out of the power supply and out of the video display unit boards on the Bondwell 14. This was to make sure that there are not going to be any problems later on with capacitors. What in the pain in the backside that was. Whoever put these together didn't make it easy at all. They soldered some of the power wires from boards and the power supply to pins on posts, and then left others on a plug that went over the top. And this is from factory. Why do this sort of thing, man? I don't know. Some people have some weird ideas. Look at the pics to see what I am talking about. And this is of more of the altered plugs. And this is the video display unit board soldered to the PSU or the power supply. Really? This is a close-up of the voltage pins for the 12, the -12, the ground, and the red 5 volts. For some reason, the orange is +12 for the motherboard. Well, this is unfortunately how far I have come to finishing these two machines. So, I take it there's probably going to be a part 2. This will be better as it will be videoed. I hope you've enjoyed this so far, and it was informative in some way. And as always, guys, have a good one. Till next time.